about to start and have a conversation about the universe and all its complications. Step right in, we've been waiting for you to say that you're confuddled. Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Yeah, we've been waiting for you, waiting for you.
Hello, you're listening to Confuddled, the podcast where we snuggle up by the fire, grab a cup of something comforting, and talk about the deep and meaningful, because we feel that's something that's not talked about enough these days. Right, Azul?
Oh, definitely. You gotta need that cup of coffee or a cup of really anything. A cup of hot chocolate is good for us in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, it's a bit chilly here at the moment.
Oh, that's putting it lightly, Alex. It's been freezing.
Yeah, it is pretty freezing. But I'm your host for this week, Alex, and Azul, as you heard, is with me.
Hello, hello, hello.
And how it works is each week we surprise each other with a topic about something profound that triggers a meaningful conversation, and hopefully you'll be leaving this podcast with something you can take away to apply to your own life. So this week, Azul, I'm going to surprise you with our topic, drumroll.
I'm profoundly surprised. Yes, go on.
Do you like martial arts, Azul?
I used to love watching wuxia films when I was a kid, so I'm gonna go with the yes.
Yeah, you love. Was it those the old kung fu movies?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Oh, I used to love watching them too.
Pretty sure I butchered the word. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced something like wuxia or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the general term for
Yeah,
martial arts.
yeah.
I think. Yeah, I used to love watching those movies. When we had MGM here. And it'd be like every Thursday night at 8:30 you'd have a kung fu movie.
Oh, wow.
And me and my brother would always sit down and watch that. And some of them were really good and some of them were absolutely terrible, but they were so funny.
I think the terrible ones are the most amusing ones, especially when they just randomly fly away.
Yeah,
And you're
the flying was great.
How can you fly again? But it was amazing.
I mean, wouldn't it be great to be able to fly like that? Like, you
Yeah.
could just make a dramatic exit anytime you wanted. If it's like an awkward situation, instead of just standing there awkwardly in silence, you could just fly away.
It looks like they're tiptoeing in the air. It's just like tiptoe in the air is what
Yeah.
I recall it looking like.
That'd be a nice power to have. I wouldn't mind doing that.
The power to tiptoe in the air.
But we also had real brutal things, like I saw one where all the disciples in this like martial arts cult were ripping out their own entrails
Jesus.
and stuff. Yeah, it was pretty messed up. And another one, there was an evil old man who had an iron crotch. So they would try to attack him and like punch him in the groin, but then their hands would get stuck and he would be invulnerable. And he'd just chuckle and stroke his beard, and then he'd swing his pelvis and they'd fly away.
What?
It was so weird.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how to respond to that.
But I miss MGM Kung Fu Thursdays. Yeah, bring them back. Bring them back. Anyway, so I'm glad you like martial arts, because today we're going to talk about Bruce Lee.
Ooh, I know he's a very interesting person, and you're one of your favorite persons, I believe.
Yeah, he has always been a role model of mine growing up, and being really inspirational to me, because I started off as a kid, loving martial arts and watching those movies where they kick butt, and you see Bruce Lee just being Bruce Lee and just dominating physically and just showing his exemplary martial arts skills, and it's always just jaw-dropping to see that, and he was so ahead of his time. Like, apparently he could do amazing things, like originally when he would punch as fast as he really could, it couldn't be captured on film at the time because it was so fast.
Wow.
I mean, I think it was his 1-inch punch. That's his famous punch.
Right.
Couldn't be captured on film. So he was amazing. He pioneered in so many areas, including bodybuilding. He actually tested the use of, when they put those electrical pulses onto your muscles to help stimulate them for growth?
Yeah.
He helped pioneer that.
Really?
He was a pioneer in so many areas, yeah.
Wow.
So he was very ahead of his time. But one thing I didn't realize until much later on in my life is that he was quite the philosopher.
Was he?
He was. He actually majored in philosophy at university.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned this earlier in one of our previous episodes as well.
I did.
Yes.
I did. So it is true, and I thought it'd be good to talk about it even more now, because he actually had a real deep and integral philosophy that applied to his martial arts. So his martial art, Jeet Kune Do, which he developed, this system of martial arts, was all based on this philosophy. And for him, he lived life every day by these principles. And so he was deeply influenced by Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. And I thought he would be a great introduction to Eastern philosophy for our listeners. because he cuts to the core of things in quite a striking way.
Yeah.
Like he has the vision of a mystic, pretty much. You'd think he's a hermit that's been in the mountains for ages. He has so many writings on his philosophy, and he's written. There's a couple of books which explains his philosophy and has lots of quotes from his writings.
Right.
Apparently, he spent like 6 months when he couldn't do any martial arts. He had an injured back,
Oh,
so
wow.
he spent the time writing philosophy and developing his martial arts and principles. So we have a lot of his writings, which is really great. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone listening knows who Bruce Lee is.
Yeah, he's a pretty common household name at this point.
Yeah, but for those who don't, he was born in 1940 in San Francisco in the States, and he died in 1973 in Hong Kong. Tragically short life.
Did he go back to Hong Kong when he died? I thought he...
Yeah, he was back and forth between Hong Kong and the US in making his films. So in his life, he developed these amazing... Or he became very famous for his martial arts. He featured in a lot of TV shows like The Green Hornet and Batman as this character who was just amazing at kicking butt and martial arts. And he did a lot for Asian representation in cinema and in TV at his time, because there was a lot of racism, of course, as there still is. But particularly back then, there was a lot of racism. He did a lot for the Asian community to bring that presence onto the screen, and he worked a lot to challenge racism and people's preconceptions about other races. He's often quoted as saying that we're all just one family under one sky.
Right.
So he was an amazing man. I found him very inspiring. Now, you're probably wondering, what does martial arts have to do with philosophy? And actually, there's quite a lot. If you investigate traditional martial arts, there's always an undercurrent of philosophy to those principles, and actually surprisingly peaceful in their philosophy
Right.
for being a violent art. Bruce Lee has a famous quote saying that to be a martial artist is to be an artist of life.
Wow.
Yeah. So Bruce Lee sort of tried breaking the rules of martial arts as well. So he's actually, in developing his own system of martial arts, he wanted people to break away from style, because he felt that style restricted people
Like,
from true, authentic self-expression.
is that like traditional style or just style in general?
Style in general, really. Because what he found was that when he faced other martial artists, he found a lot of them were quite bound by their schools and by their way of doing things. Oh, you're supposed to punch like this. No, you don't do techniques like this. You only follow this set of movements that someone hundreds of years ago developed, and we don't ever change or evolve.
Right.
But he believed in evolution and an organic process. So his martial art was syncretic. He integrated the best of all these different types of styles and always tried to find the best way for the human being to express themselves in a martial way in relationship to their opponent.
So he was kind of like a pioneer of mixed martial arts kind of thing.
Actually, he was.
Yeah?
Yeah, he was. There's a lot that we owe him a lot of credit for.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's another quote by him. He says that the main thing is teaching a man to do his thing. Just be himself. I'm against trying to impose a style on man. This is an art, an expression of man's own self. So you can see he's looking to the deeper aspect of martial arts as an art, a usual art that is authentic self-expression of the human being, which is what art is.
Yeah.
I would say,
yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, we've had our disagreements about what art is and art is not.
True. Yeah.
But that's one way of looking at it. I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So in order to relate martial arts with philosophy even more, do you know what the words gung fu mean?
No, like some kind of neologism for kung fu of some sort?
So gung fu is the Cantonese version of kung fu.
Oh, okay.
Gung fu didn't originally mean a master of the art of gung fu like Wing Chun. Gung fu actually meant that you're a master of absolutely anything. So a man could be called to have gung fu if he was a master of the tea ceremony.
Right.
A man could have gung fu as a master calligrapher. A man would have gung fu if they were a great carpenter. So you could apply it to almost any art or skill. And if you're very accomplished at it, you would be said to have gung fu.
So does it just mean like intense accomplishment or like high level of achievement?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that's what it means. It just means to be a master of anything.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that might surprise you about Bruce Lee is that he was very critical of Western philosophy.
Really?
Very critical.
Okay.
Yeah. So his problem with Western philosophy is that it doesn't accept reality as it is. So as in life, we embrace the full reality of what we see and what we feel in general, and we don't have any doubt about it, about what we're experiencing. Okay, this is reality. But his critique of Western philosophy is that it doesn't accept what life believes, that it strives to convert reality into a problem. So we always ask questions like, is this chair really there that's in front of me, or can it exist by itself? And he's saying that is not making life easy for us because we're constantly questioning life itself and reality. He says it just overcomplicates it and creates problems that don't need to be there.
So this is interesting because I am a big fan of Western philosophy as opposed to Eastern philosophy, which you are a big fan of, I think.
Yeah, even though I am a Greek geek, I do love the Stoics. I've got to say I'm deeply influenced by Eastern philosophy.
That being said, though, Stoicism has a lot of parallels with Eastern philosophy, so I can
It sure
understand
does.
why you would feel attracted to Stoicism at the very least.
Yeah.
But I imagine you're not a big fan of determinism or anything of like the more modern philosophies that arose from the West. Is that a...
Well, I love talking about them, I guess.
Oh, certainly.
But I can see the inherent problem in what Bruce Lee is saying is that if we over-question reality itself, I mean, it's important to question, but if we overanalyze and create problems out of nothing, we're not doing ourselves any favors.
How does Bruce Lee determine where to draw the line between questioning life and questioning reality and making reality too complicated by questioning it?
Well, I think according to him, it's all about naturalness.
Right.
It's all about being natural. So he says it's like asking a person how he breathes. So if I ask you, Azul, how do you breathe?
Should I answer that?
Yeah.
Well, I open my mouth and then take a deep breath. And
Okay.
then...
Are you finding it harder to breathe right now, thinking about how you breathe?
Oh, what you're describing is the whole tongue thing, right? Like, where is your tongue, Alex? And then suddenly you're aware of your tongue, and then
Yes.
you can't put your tongue anywhere because, oh, sorry, listeners.
Yeah, it's annoying that you get kind of restless and
Yeah, and then it's like, where's my tongue supposed to be? Like,
Yeah.
it's very, yeah, right. Okay, but like with the tongue example, at least I can understand that because it's obvious to me because I now am going through the pain of not knowing where to put my tongue.
yeah.
But how do I know that from a reality perspective? Like, do I go through the pain of... So, for context, there's a stool near us, and if I were to question whether that stool was real, I would just kick it. It seems pretty real to me because I hurt my leg.
Oh, you're
So,
right.
Yeah, I'm good. But is that level of questioning too much, or is it... Like,
Well,
where do
I
you
think you answered. I think you answered your own question there because you
Ooh.
caught on to the point. Is that when you mentioned your tongue and where to place it, and you created that analogy, that made it very uncomfortable and it interrupted your body's natural comfort and ease, right?
Yes.
And your natural ease. So, just the same, if you ask someone, how exactly do you breathe? How are you doing this right now? It interrupts the natural process of breathing that the body's already doing. And it's you can see that the conscious mind, overthinking, is interfering with reality and having a less stressful and just natural ease in living.
So is Bruce Lee's general, I suppose, idea or philosophy, one of Bruce Lee's ideals or views is to accept reality as it is, or...
Yeah.
Right.
Basically to accept reality as it is and don't interfere with reality, and that's a Taoist approach.
Right.
Taoism is an ancient Chinese philosophy, and it believes in something called the Tao, which is translated often as the way. Now, it's not God, it's not like God, but it's, the organic process of things. So whatever makes the trees grow, the nails on your fingers and toes grow, and your hair grow, and what makes all your cells move and be in an organized system, and what makes all of nature work in one cohesive whole, much like what the Stoics were mentioning a few episodes ago. That is the Tao. And Taoism believes that we need to live in accord with the way, with the Tao in nature, in order to have an easier life, in order to have a happier, more peaceful life. And you come out a lot more content and happier for it.
Right.
So what Bruce Lee is saying, and actually I agree with him, the problem with the Western approach is that it attempts to explain life as opposed to revealing how to experience it. So if you're always focused on theorizing, you're not experiencing it. And if you're analysing, you're standing separate from reality, or trying to be, which is a complete illusion, because you're already part of it. It's an unnatural resistance to simply allowing the experiencing of life.
Right. Okay. So it's kind of like the first thing that comes to mind is taking a picture of some place instead of just viewing that place.
Yeah, because then let's just say you're at a party, you're having a good time, but then you suddenly stop to think, who is it that is enjoying this party? And you start analysing all the aspects of the party and what you're feeling and thinking about all the different aspects of the party, like, oh, how should I be acting right now? Which we actually tend to do.
Yeah,
but
now I
that
know
stresses
why I
us
don't
out,
enjoy
right?
parties.
But that stresses us out, right?
Yes.
And
I
that actually
suppose.
makes you more uninvolved in reality. It's an illusion. You create an illusion of a separate thinker or an ego that is analysing reality. So you're not really living because you're constantly creating the separate illusionary self that's observing what you're doing right now when you're actually already involved in reality. So it creates this false separation, which means you don't get to fully live and experience life.
Right.
So Eastern philosophy, I think, is much better than Western philosophy in terms of showing the nature of the mind. It has profound knowledge of how the mind works and how to best live life in a healthy way and with a healthy mind. So understanding the nature of the mind, as Eastern philosophy describes it, is actually really great for dealing with adversity.
Yeah.
So there's something, okay, forgive my pronunciation of the Chinese languages,
I would not
because
know better.
I'm probably butchering it. I know, like, intonation is everything, so I might be saying something rude by accident. I don't know.
Apologies in advance, viewers.
Apologies in advance. But there's something called Wu Xin, which means no mind, and it's also known as original mind or Buddha mind. So it doesn't mean an empty mind or a mind devoid of all emotion, as sometimes those words might give the impression of. It doesn't even mean quietness of mind either, because some people have concepts of enlightenment as in being that you don't have any thoughts whatsoever.
I'm going to stop you very temporarily and ask you to spell that, just so our viewers could...
Wu Xin is, well, in English it's W-U-H-S-I-N, Wu Xin, so it means no mind. So this is the original mind, and they believe, and in Buddhism and Taoism, they believe that we are actually already naturally whole and happy and healthy.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see you're struggling with that.
Yep.
Yeah, but
I'm sure the skepticism is showing in my face.
yeah, but please challenge me.
Well, okay, how does one make the claim that we are naturally whole and happy?
Well, the thing is that we, because of this separate thinker we've created in this overanalysis, we started interfering with reality and with nature and with the way of things. And by not accepting reality, and by not letting reality do its thing, which includes our own mind and our own body, by not letting the Tao do its thing, we start creating problems.
Sure, but okay, so I like taking things to the extreme just to see if it stands stands as strongly as usual.
Okay.
For you and me, it's easy to say that if we live life day to day without actually worrying about things such as social norms or what people are thinking of you, or creating an ego by taking a step backwards and analyzing a situation, I do not doubt it that we would be happier people. So as far as that goes, I do agree that is one way of viewing life.
And that's the thing. It doesn't mean not having those things, not having a rational mind that you use and employ for normal problem solving and practical use in everyday life. It means not having a mind that's solely based on that. See, what happens in the West, and this is thanks to the Greeks, so it's the gift and the curse of Western philosophy, is that we've become so attached to our rational thinking mind that we think it's all it is, and we become so entrenched in this separate ego, illusory ego that we've created, this little observer and overanalyzer, that we've sort of lost touch of how to just naturally be.
Right. See, I am a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Putting your rational mind on a pedestal, and
Yeah.
I can see its flaws. Like, I'm not saying that I think I am a person who is fairly unbiased in that I can definitely see that if I want to live a happier life, then it's easy for me to follow an Eastern philosophy and live life to its fullest. But the question is, do I want to give up what Western philosophy provides to live a happy life?
And I think I've done what I've wanted to do, dear listeners, is trigger an existential crisis in us all. But don't worry, I'm sure it's going to be resolved by the end of the episode. I'm sure.
I hope so.
I'm sure. So It doesn't mean not having this Western rational mind at all. It doesn't mean not having thoughts that you can use and engage with. But what Eastern philosophy, particularly in Buddhism and in Taoism, reveals about the nature of the mind shows that the mind isn't, well, it shows that we're not our thoughts.
Yes.
It shows that we're not our thoughts. So,
Which is surprisingly so counterintuitive to like Western philosophy with like cogito ergo sum, with like
yeah,
I think therefore
that's the
I am.
greatest. I think that's the greatest fallacy in Western philosophy. That is the worst statement anyone could have ever made.
I'm gonna, just like that's for another. That argument is for another episode.
The thing is that the nature of the mind is actually pure awareness. Think about it. Who is it that is aware of your thoughts? Because what happens is that we start creating this whole thought structure around everything, and it's very unstable, and we have to analyze and think about everything in order to create stability, mental stability of some kind.
Yeah.
But if you look at for example, meditation introduces this. If you sit with yourself, you notice that you're aware of your thoughts, right?
Yeah.
You're not this thinker who's constantly analyzing. There's an awareness behind that.
From which the thoughts arise.
Yeah.
Go on.
So that's you. So the problem is, in the West, we confuse a lot the thinker with who we are. We're fused to our thoughts. And this creates a lot of suffering, and this is what a lot of modern therapy does. It's actually influenced by Buddhism as well, and meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah, CBT and that sort of thing.
Exactly. So it helps you to defuse yourself from your thoughts and to create some sort of separation from your thoughts. And then that way the emotional charge of those thoughts isn't as powerful, right?
Yes.
So whenever you have a thought, you can notice that you're aware of that thought. So there's an awareness behind that thought. So you're not those thoughts. You can't be if you're aware of them, are you?
Well, I'm not saying that I am the thoughts, but the thoughts do come from that which is me.
Which is?
Well, I don't know.
Awareness. Or consciousness.
Yes, consciousness, awareness. But
Mm-hmm.
knowing that the thoughts aren't you, but they come from you, what does that provide us with?
Peace.
Yeah, I walk right into that one.
So this is the genius of Eastern philosophies, that in understanding the nature of the mind, it gives us the best tools to deal with adversity and to live life as peacefully and as happily as possible, even amidst adversity or whatever happens, and like whatever challenges arise. It sort of teaches you to adapt better and to flow better and to carry a sense of peace and happiness with you. In order to get this so-called no mind, Bruce Lee says, although quietude and calmness are necessary, it is the non-graspiness of the mind that mainly constitutes the principle of no-mindedness. A gung fu man employs his mind as mirror. It grasps nothing, yet it refuses nothing. Let the mind think what it likes without interference by the separate thinker or ego within oneself. So long as it thinks what it wants, there is absolutely no effort in letting go. And the disappearance of the effort to let go is precisely the disappearance of the separate thinker. So what happens is that often, for example, when people learn meditation, is when they first learn this, they think, oh, I've got to try and let go, I've got to try and relax. But then that's just feeding into the original problem.
Yeah, the never-ending cycle of getting lost in your thoughts.
Yeah, and then you get stressed. It's like, oh no, I'm getting lost in my thoughts. And you get stressed, like, I'm not able to let go. And then you try to let go of that. And then that just, whatever you try to do, it defeats the purpose. So
Yep.
One of the things that Taoism teaches is that nature is effortless.
Right. It's kind of like asking you to not think about a purple elephant will not help you not think about a purple elephant, because now all you can think of is a purple elephant.
Exactly. So Bruce Lee goes on to say that there is nothing to try to do, for whatever comes up moment by moment is accepted, including non-acceptance. No-mindedness is then not being without emotional feeling, or thought for that matter, but being one in whom feeling is not sticky or blocked. It is a mind immune to emotional influences, like a river in which everything is flowing on ceaselessly, without cessation or standing still.
So he talks about emotion there as well. Could
Yeah.
you explain to us where that comes into play?
So, for example, when we often get an emotion coming up, like let's just say it's something very unpleasant, like we suddenly feel really angry or really sad or upset about something someone has said at that party that we've been in, or we feel awkward or uncomfortable. So normally we start stressing out about having that emotion. And what I found is that I've done this. I've started, and this is something I always used to do, is I try to rationalize my way out of feeling that feeling.
Wait, what?
So when you have an emotion come up that's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
So you try to reason your way out of it. You try to use your thinking mind. It's like, oh, or you might stress out about feelings like, oh no, I'm feeling anger. Oh no, I'm feeling upset. Why am I feeling upset? That person made me feel upset. How dare they? And then you project that anger onto them.
Right.
Yeah. Do you find you do that? So when you feel something, do you find that, or that you might even try to rationalize your way out of it, like saying, oh, it's okay. Like, no, it will be fine because of this, or no, it won't be fine because so-and-so is coming, or, you know?
I think I do, but perhaps not as viscerally or as clearly as you do. It's much more of a innate process that goes on the back of my mind, part of like an introspection of sorts. Like when I get angry, for example, as part of that emotion, I also end up thinking about why, how, what exactly caused this anger, that sort of thing. It's like all together, I guess.
Although I actually find that can be helpful at times too.
It definitely helps me to avoid basically taking out my anger on other people because, for example, if you do something and that annoys or angers me, automatically I recognize what you did that made me annoyed or angry. And so I'm not annoyed at you. I'm just annoyed that that particular thing happened. And so that way I don't end up like actually taking out my anger on you. I am still stressed, so it's not a win-win for me, and I'm still aware of that emotion and it's still part of me, but it's not like I'm now snapping at you because I know it's not you as a whole, but just that one part of you that happened to show up in this kind of... It's a weird feel. It's weird to explain, to be honest. Like,
yeah,
it's like let's say hypothetically that I hate tics, like if somebody like stutters. Let's say,
yeah,
I love stutterers. Like I have nothing against stutterers, but just that's the first thing that came to mind.
Azul, I just can't take how much you lie on this podcast. So, how dare you? I'm kidding.
But let's say hypothetically that I hate stuttering, and let's say that you're totally you talk normally. I just stuttered myself, and then you stutter one time, and that annoys me. Then I find that when I was a kid, I would just get annoyed at that, and then that would be part of me getting annoyed at you. And so I'd get annoyed at you and then snap at you or be annoyed at or angry at you. But I think now through some process, taking your words, I do rationalize it a bit and I recognize what actually caused me to get angry, why it caused me to get angry, like the process through which I was angry because of that aspect. So using stuttering as an example, if you stutter, here's my train of thought. So Alex stuttered, that caused me to remember some kind of thing that caused me to get annoyed, and therefore it's aligned with that event in my past that makes me annoyed, and that's what causing me to get annoyed. And so it's not Alex that's annoying me, it's just the fact that that is related to this thing that happened to me, and that's what's annoying me. Or
interesting.
Yeah. Or if you get late, for example, Alex was late. No.
which to be fair, I am with Azul, and it's something I've tried to correct.
That's totally fine. This is just an example. I don't get annoyed for people getting late.
Yeah, no, he's showing me a lot of anger. He's flipping me off right now. It's terrible.
Wow. But if that's an example, for example, let's say you were late to pick me up for something, and then I am aware of that, and I say, well, I'm annoyed because I could have done this thing, but I couldn't because Alex was late. And so I'm not annoyed.
Alex.
I'm not annoyed at Alex, but I'm annoyed that I didn't get the opportunity to do this thing. And so that allows me to kind of work through my anger and not essentially take it out on other people.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work. Sometimes it's just so strong that I can't, it is a part of me and I have to take it out somehow. And at that point, I do my best to limit how it affects other people.
Right.
But I kind of get where you're going with this, I feel like.
And I actually get where you're going.
Yeah?
I get where you're coming from, because that actually can work, because that, to be honest, gives you some awareness of that feeling of anger, right?
Yeah.
So then you're not so involved in it.
Yeah, so I studied psychology, and I think this came from that as well, because CBT has, cognitive behavioral therapy has a aspect of it where you become aware of your emotions, and it's not rationalizing so much as accepting the fact that you have the emotion and letting it pass through, but also trying to understand it, not from a perspective of getting embroiled in it, but more from a take a step back, let it pass through you, but also take that opportunity to understand why it's happening and that sort of thing.
That's interesting, because that is very similar to the approach that the East is teaching. I think it's come from that because it's to be one in whom, to quote Bruce Lee, one in whom feeling or emotion is not sticky or blocked. We need to have a non-graspiness of mind, be like a mirror, to accept whatever comes, to receive what comes, but not grasp after it. And I guess to clear up the confusion, which seems apparent with Western thinking and rational thinking and this approach, Eastern approach, is that it doesn't mean not to have thinking, but it means that we don't, for example, as you were saying, we don't get embroiled in those emotions, because there's a type of thinking that we can do where we get so involved and caught up in emotions and thoughts and feelings, which we all do. I mean, I do it.
I do it too.
I do it, yeah. But then I noticed how this Eastern approach is very true, because I've noticed, that's where the problem's coming up. So it's when you get embroiled in things and the type of thinking that does get you sucked into things, and it overanalyzes things, and it always sucks you in closer to emotions or feelings rather than giving you space and awareness. Yeah. Like what you were saying with CBT. Yeah. That's the difference. It's quite a subtle thing. The mind has all these subtleties to it, I guess. It's quite... I always find it endlessly fascinating trying to study my own mind. Right. So... how do we get this sort of mind that the East is teaching?
How do we get this sort of mind?
There's a famous Taoist philosopher called Chuang Tzu. So it's real hard for me to remember. Chuang Tzu. And he says, he's quoted as saying, the baby looks at things all day without winking. That is because his eyes are not focused on any particular object. He goes without knowing where he's going and stops without knowing what he's doing. He merges himself with the surroundings and moves along with it. These are the principles of mental hygiene. So again, he's saying in a different way, in a more poetic way, what we were describing before. There's no forcing, there's nothing to try to do, there's no trying to concentrate or focus on anything particular, even like your own breath, as a lot of meditators might do. Advanced meditation actually encourages you not to focus on anything at all and to have no technique, just to sit. Yeah. So it's resting in your own being. So Bruce Lee elaborates on this. He says, a Kung Fu man's mind can remain present, which I think is very relevant, actually, because of all the mindfulness these days. And a lot of people try to be present, but I don't know if you've had a go at mindfulness, but I know I found it really hard to try and concentrate and being present all the time. Like trying to force my mind to, no, I'm not focusing on my breath, or to stay rooted in the present moment. It's quite tricky, right? Yeah, I would say I'm a lost cause in regards to mindfulness. I tend to be very easily distractible, and it just doesn't work for me. Like, as in, perhaps I'm not going to say it doesn't work for me. I think I need to put more effort into it. When it comes to the fact that the amount of effort I have to put in isn't worth it compared to the amount of pros I get from it, then I kind of just take a step back and say, this may not be for me, but by no means am I saying it's not for everybody else. I see what you're saying, because I'm sure a lot of people relate, is that with the popularity in mindfulness at the moment, and when I'm sure many of your listeners have tried it, you can start getting stressed out about being mindful. And all the effort that goes into trying to be mindful all the time, that can be quite a lot. So this approach is actually quite a relief. And that's what I think the problem is in removing mindfulness from its original Eastern philosophical context. When it becomes secularized like it has, you lose a lot of this wisdom, which makes it so much easier. Right. So don't try to be mindful. That's the key. So to go back to... Wait, what? Yeah, don't try to be mindful. That's the key. You're already naturally present and aware. Oh. Yeah. Right. So to go back to Bruce Lee's quote, he says, a Kung Fu man's mind can remain present because even when related to this or that object, it doesn't cling to it. The flow of thought is like water filling a pond, which is always ready to flow off again. It can work its inexhaustible power because it is free, and can be open to everything because it is empty. I feel like my mind is more like a drop of water that's falling down on a rainy day, because it's just going to hit everything and then come to the ground and then go away again and then just disappear off the face of the earth, because you no longer know where the drop of water is. Wow. Sounds like a busy mind. Yeah, I get this a lot, and I think that's partially because I have yet to master mindfulness. Well, the thing is, there's nothing to master. Because one should not try to be mindful. One is mindful. So I've got some good news for you. You can be relieved. You can just rest and relax, because that's all you need to do, is just allow yourself to be and allow your mind to do what it does. and the key is just not interfering and not trying to not interfere as
Right.
well. So it can get kind of paradoxical and like you can get caught up in your own head, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right. So there's another principle in Chinese philosophy, or in Taoist philosophy, called Wu Wei, which is a Taoist principle which means non-striving. And that's the key, apparently, to have Wu Xin, or no mind.
So non-striving sounds like something I could get behind because I'm a very lazy person.
Yeah, it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Non-striving doesn't mean not having goals and not going towards them or not working to achieve things. What it does mean doing those things without the stress and without the need to accomplish them, without having your whole existence, without having your whole self-worth dependent on achieving these things. To quote Bruce Lee again on non-striving, he says, Wu means not or non, and Wei means action, doing, striving, straining, or busying. However, it doesn't really mean doing nothing, but to let one's mind alone, trusting it to work by itself. The most important thing is not to strain in any way. So here he's showing the Taoist approach. Remember I was saying about the great Tao of Taoism?
Path.
Yeah, the way that operates in all of nature. We have to remember it operates in our bodies and also in our minds.
Right.
And that's a wonderful thing, because what he's saying there is to trust that, to trust the nature of your mind and this great organizing natural power that's present in nature. It's also present in your own mind, to let that do its thing. And once you trust that, you find your mind starts to get a bit more quiet, you start to be more present and peaceful. And when things come, you allow things to come, and when they go, you allow them to go. That could be external and internal events. And that, according to Eastern philosophy, in a very, very broad picture, is how you remain peaceful and go with the flow, as they say.
Right. I think it is quite a deceptively simple aspect of things that I think could definitely be achieved, but is harder said than done. Because when you say it, it seems quite straightforward. But then from the little bit of experience I do have, I know it's a bit harder than it sounds.
Yeah, the mind overcomplicates it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Our mind always wants to create an achievement out of it as well, when there's nothing to achieve.
That is true.
Yeah. So it's a continuous practice. I'm still practicing every day, and I still fail at times, but there's nothing to fail at, I remind myself. So. Yeah, it's just getting used to resting in yourself.
Yeah, and I think going back slightly to something I was talking about earlier, in order to fully embrace these principles of happiness and peace, one needs to be in a situation or in a position to actually, accept what the sacrifices and the gains of following such principles are.
Right.
To elaborate, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Western philosophy, and when you place your rational mind on a pedestal, you can't really do both at the same time. You can't have the rational mind on a pedestal. Not to say that you can't use the rational mind. You're right. You can follow Taoist principles and still be a rational person, but you can't place your rationality or the rational mind above everything else and follow Taoist principles.
Exactly. So I like to keep a balance between them. I find that Eastern philosophy allows me to rest in the nature of my mind and know, hey, look, I'm not my thoughts, not to put rational thinking and reason, which the West has put on a pedestal, not to put that on its high pedestal, but to be able to use it as a tool when I need it and still enjoy the fruits of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good statement, and I think something that I can't help but compare this to. And I know, Alex, that you're a theist and I am an atheist.
Yeah.
Touching very slightly on this, I often find myself wondering or hoping that at one point in time I could be a theist. Not from a skeptical point of view, but it just seems like from an atheistic point of view that being a theist comes with a lot of pros, like happiness more so than atheism. And again, not to say that atheism doesn't have happiness. I do enjoy being an atheist, but with it comes quite a lot of skeptical and rational
It does.
concerns that you have to basically hold up above yourself and live with.
Well, let me tell you, just to make you feel better, is that, as you know, Buddhism's an atheist religion. And there's a lot of happy Buddhists, and Buddha was pretty happy himself, and a lot of enlightened teachers from Buddhism who are pretty happy. Taoism is kind of a grey area. because it believes in the Tao. Some people say that's God, but really it isn't. It's like the organic process of nature, but some people can argue that maybe that is God, maybe that isn't. And also, there's a lot of theists who are very unhappy, bitter, and angry people.
Oh, yes, yes.
As well.
I should clarify. I don't mean to say that atheists are unhappy. It just like being an atheist just requires you to come to terms with the infinite nothingness.
Yeah.
Being a theist does not necessarily, depending on what you believe in, require that. And if you can do that, if you can come to terms with it, then everything's fine and you're happy as can be as an atheist. And the reason I brought this up is because it seems like from a taking this back to the rational / Taoist point of views, if you were to be willing to fundamentally give up putting your rational mind on a pedestal, give up putting rationality before everything, like then you would generally be a bit more of a happy person, I think, because you're not having to think about everything that happens. You're not having to second guess yourself. You're not having to rethink social encounters and stuff like that. And yes, this possibly has to do with being socially inept to a certain level as well. I think everybody has a level where, after a social encounter, they overthink that and they think, oh my gosh, I should have done this. I should have done that.
I've done that heaps of times. I've gotten better, thankfully, thanks to these teachings.
Exactly, yeah. and I think that genuinely exemplifies what I'm talking about, because if you bring your rational mind to the pedestal and if you place rationality before everything else, then overthinking something and rethinking a social encounter and thinking, oh no, I could have done this and this and this, is part of your life. On the other hand, if you believe that rationality is important, but perhaps not the go-to, perhaps not the most important thing in life, then I think you don't have to do that, because you're living life in the moment. Once you've lived that moment, you don't have to think about it. Rationality doesn't come into play then, because it's past and you're now living in a different moment and you're not having to rethink that. Your
mind's flowing. And you're flowing with what's constantly occurring.
Exactly, and I feel like that's how I feel about this. While I completely agree with you that if I were to believe, if I were to accept into my heart and into my life the Taoist principles, as Bruce Lee put it, I could be a happier person. But do I want to let go of that intense sense of rationality that I hold dear as well? I know it brings me a lot of pain, but also it's kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like you've grown up with this sense.
I know, it's hard to let go of something you've grown up with, especially as Westerners, right? We've grown up with this sort of mind, and it's very hard to let go of. But think about it this way: you get rid of the pain and you get all the benefits of it.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, like I see, overthinking things has brought me a lot of pain in my life, but overthinking things have also allowed me to avoid a lot of really awkward situations and learn from the past.
Oh yeah, exactly, and that's where you can use it. But then you're not enslaved by it. You're the one who's using it. It's not using you.
True, but I think that if you are an overthinker, unfortunately, when you stare into the abyss stares back into you.
And if we were to go to the other topic of theism versus atheism, I'd be saying that if you stare into the abyss, you'll find God. But let's leave that for another episode, hopefully. So I guess to sum up, go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Trust your mind. Trust the natural, organic process of your mind and of your emotions. Allow them to flow and come and leave again without any resistance or interference. Don't try to do anything. Just relax and try practicing being. And if you do practice meditation listening to this, I've got a secret for you. Don't try to meditate. It's going to make it a lot easier and a lot less stressful.
Right.
We can, when you're starting out, it can be quite a lot of effort. So this is a shortcut to meditation. It's just relax and be. Don't try to do anything. Just sit, and then you'll find what they're talking about here. There's nothing to concentrate on. Yeah,
brilliant. I think from my perspective, what I've learned is that Taoism can definitely, or essentially Eastern philosophies, as you mentioned, principles as well, can definitely lead to a more happy and fulfilled life. It just depends on whether you want to be as crazy as me and embrace this like intense sense of rationality or not.
Right.
And honestly, from my perspective, from a rational perspective, the rationality in my mind says, try it out. Try out the Taoist principles, see how it feels, and
Give it
see
a go.
where
What have you got to lose?
Give,
right?
give it a go, exactly.
Except your Western rational mind. I mean,
I don't think a lot of people are that intensely concerned about rationality, though. If they were, we wouldn't be living in this world.
it's true. No, we need it. I'm not saying we don't need it. We definitely need it. We wouldn't have this world and all that we enjoy and all the technological advances without it.
Yeah.
It's just being able to employ that mind without being enslaved by it. That's all.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that rationality and Taoist principles can fundamentally be alongside each other, hand in hand.
Yeah, and when we say rationality, of course, we mean the overuse of thinking, not just being rational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
when I say
Yeah.
rationality in the context of holding hands, I mean it in the way of us thinking rationally. When
Right.
I say rationality in the sense of overthinking, that's more putting it on the pedestal. It's a bit
Yeah.
confusing to understand because I'm essentially.
It's a confusing thing.
It is, yeah.
It is. I highly recommend to our listeners to check out Bruce Lee even more if you haven't already. There's a lot of works which contain his philosophy. It's so helpful, and his teachings really help give a good introduction to Eastern thought. So I hope you guys have taken a lot away from this. Hey guys, that's us for another episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope we gave you a smile and something to think about.
If you like this episode, please give us a rating on Apple.
Every 5-star rating goes a long way to help us keep going and reach more people. We really appreciate all your support.
You can find us on Facebook as Confuddled Podcast.
On Twitter at confuddled_pod. That's CONFUDDLED_pod.
And on Instagram at confuddled_podcast. Or just email us at confuddledpodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from you. Share your comments, queries, ideas, suggestions, light bulb moments.
And your deepest, darkest secrets.
Maybe not.
So get in touch.
Okay, until next week.
We've been waiting